back to another episode of Detonation. This is going to be a very interesting episode because you're all familiar with Johann and Ben Zion, and this is a Schattke Shakeup because I'm calling this episode the Schattke Shakeup because we're about to get very messy on a couple of topics of healthcare, which is very close to Ben Zion, and the UBI. So this is going to be extremely interesting. Welcome, Mr. Schattke.
All right, let me start by running down the actual platform points. The platform point is that the Transhumanist Party supports a universal basic income, and that they support health care and longevity treatment available to everyone. Okay. Now, if we do that in a government method with current methods of providing government health care, some people say, universal Medicare for all. Well, Medicare for all doesn't cover everything, and it isn't zero money out the door to people. Okay, Medicare for all, you've got hundreds of dollars a month in premiums deducted from the retirees thing. You've got large copays and a fairly hefty limit of payments in the thousands of dollars. So it's not free health care by any means. And even if you do that, it'd still go from the current 731 billion to I worked it out, nearly 4 trillion. And that's just the government's part. That's $12,000 per person that is served. That's $2,000. That's $1,000 a month paid out average per person on Medicare. Now, I admit that the people on Medicare are at this point old, the infirm, so they are the people who have the highest medical costs in our society. But if we're offering longevity services to everybody, those are expensive treatments. I was watching Jeff Berwick down in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, getting stem cell treatment, and that stem cell treatment was $1,500 for one treatment. That he's going to have to repeat again in a few months because his bones aren't producing the stem cells. So what they do is they go in and they take your cells and they turn them into stem cells, and then they clone them in vitro, and then they re-inject those stem cells into places where you're having specific troubles, right? Like if you've got a weak liver, they re-inject stem cells into your liver, and your liver can then use those stem cells. Some of them will become liver cells, and it'll make your liver stronger, and then you can get healthier. But whatever the underlying issue is that has made you ill is still there. So that's a great thing, but you add $6,000 a month a year to Medicare, that doubles, that adds 50% to the cost of Medicare. And yeah, it'd extend people's lives, but that's, so people say, well, healthcare shouldn't just be for the rich. Well, great. Okay, so that's even in Mexico, where it's easier to become a doctor, and it's easier to treat someone because you don't have a pile of regulations of 3 feet high in the Affordable Care Act, right? That you have to abide by in order to do business in Chicago, Chicago or LA or New York City. So you can't do this stem cell treatment in Chicago. In Chicago, they've got to take it out of specific cells out of the body, and it's crazy. It's just crazy. So, some people might say, well, the VA is 100% government payer system, right? And that's already there. The VA serves 9 million veterans. And again, a lot of those veterans are decrepit or disabled in some way, especially, people who've, had limbs blown off by an IED over in Afghanistan or some other horrible, war injury. And so those people are, in need of fairly expensive care. But there's also a bunch of veterans that, served 4 years in a peacetime situation, and they go to VA because they can go to VA free because that was part of their deal. And, they're, going to VA when they're, 30, 40, 50. And, so they're not going to be, so VA spends $105 billion a year for those 9 million people. So it's a little bit less than Medicare. It's a little cheaper. VA has a significant capital stock and spends a significant amount of money on maintaining that. So there's but that's got to be covered by all of the people that serve Medicare too. They have their capital stocks. So just on funding it, even if we went to everybody gets VA care, right? If we opened up the VA to everybody in the country, it might not cost all of the 3.8 trillion that would work out to. And that'd be less than, Medicare for all in it, because at least we're not doing third-party payer things where, we've got some third-party billing going on. So it's problematic, just from a financial standpoint. And then we get, the moral issue. You can't legitimately make a claim for something that requires somebody else's capital or work or effort, right? If you do that, you are saying you own them. And I am not going to support slavery. I'm not going to support slavery of doctors. I'm not going to support slavery of black people. I'm not going to support slavery of illegal immigrants or anything. I am not. And so if a doctor decides he doesn't want to work, there's nothing we can do about it. And that's what a lot of doctors have been doing under the Affordable Care Act. They've been deciding they don't want to work because it's just too much of a pain in the ass. And so they're retiring early, or they're going into some other medical-related field, research, or something like that, or they're moving out of the country. And what does that do? Well, that means that wait times, especially for people on Medicare, have increased. Okay, I can't call up my Medicare doctor and get in tomorrow. I can't. They don't have an opening. They'll put me on a list to wait, but I can't. I could go to a clinic, but, you know, that's not my doctor that knows me. And that clinic is available to everybody. Anybody could walk in the door of that clinic. It's not, nothing special about it. So what do we do with it? Well, the first thing would be to expand the number of doctors, make it cheaper to train and license a doctor, and that's breaking the hold of the AMA. They worked for 40 years to be the licensing body for doctors throughout the United States.
Can I just
one
ask,
state at a time.
Can I just ask, does that mean American Medical Association?
Yes, the American Medical Association. And nobody else in the United States is allowed to call someone a doctor. You have to pass the AMA medical requirements to become a doctor. And they, they'll say it's to protect the public and everything, but even they've recognized, even these states that have put in the AMA stuff have recognized that that's limiting the number of doctors, and that's why we have nurse practitioners. That you didn't have nurse practitioners in the 1960s. Why? Well, because the AMA was more lenient in the number of doctors they allowed to pass and to become doctors. The number of applicants they allowed to pass and become doctors was a lot higher per capita then. And slowly they've tightened and tightened and tightened, and that raises the price of healthcare. It's a supply and demand thing. You can't get away from the laws of supply and demand. And at the same time that this supply was tightening, they introduced Medicare, where the great burden of costs was shifted from the person paying them to a third party. And what that does is that increases demand. So when you increase demand and decrease supply, you get rapidly rising prices. The prices have to come to the equilibrium of the new constrictions. And there's a lot of deadweight loss. A lot. Every time you introduce an artificial cost or an artificial demand expander, you introduce deadweight loss. Okay? Now, so what can we do? Well, on a federal level, you could put in a law making a federal body separate from the AMA and break this AMA monopoly. Okay? And you don't even have to say that is that the AMA has to stop. All you have to do is introduce competition. Okay? And so people, a lot of people trust the AMA, want to go to an AMA doctor. Well, that's a demand for AMA doctors. And they may not trust a federal medical licensing board doctor as much as they trust an AMA doctor. So that would be a lower cost for a federal medical licensing board doctor, right? And those doctors, the VA would say, well, it's federal. They could say right off the bat in the licensing board law that the VA has to use federal medical licensing board doctors. Right off the bat, the VA lowers its costs because they're bringing in a bunch of new doctors who they are licensing, who another federal agency is licensing. And then people who work at the VA will have, experience. They'll get experience. They'll get things. A doctor coming out of the military, perhaps trained by the military in some way, could be accepted by the Federal Medical Licensing Board automatically, things like that, right? And then you could have some competition, and the AMA would have to relax in order to meet the competition, and prices for doctors would come down, and prices for and the availability of healthcare would improve. Wait times would drop, and everything would get better, right? And so that's how introducing competition, even without breaking these state level monopolies, or without you on the federal level would say that anybody who accepts Medicare has to accept Federal Medical Licensing Board doctors, right? And so then by doing these two-pronged, the VA and Medicare, you get a lot of additional doctors into the system in the places where we need to reduce the cost for the federal government, right? And maybe then we could drop prices to the price for things in Mexico, where it's a third of American prices. And, and then, well, maybe then Medicare for all could be done without raising taxes. Because, instead of being 4 trillion, it would be 1.3 trillion. And that's kind of close to, the 800 billion that we were spending right now. And it's, and if we trim away the defense budget significantly, then we could manage healthcare for all on a Medicare type plan without busting the budget. So you have to think about the supply and demand situation to fix this. You can't just think we're going to pass a law and it'll make everything better. If we suddenly introduced Medicare for all or VA care for all, it would increase the demand for health care and without producing any additional supply. And we'd basically have to take over all of the hospitals that would go broke.
Yeah, this is a serious concern, and this happens in this has happened in socialist countries before, where they've implemented a generic policy based on a demand side issue, and the supply has overwhelmed a demand side issue, but the other demand, the consumer demand, has been so high for that service, and the governments are so inefficient at implementing it and implementing all the back channels that it overwhelms the system, and these countries collapse. The Soviet Union was a Medicare for all country, you know what I mean? And yet, we saw how that worked out in a way.
Well, people are dying waiting on getting a primary care physician. You know how long it takes just to get assigned a primary care physician in Canada?
3 years.
The wait lists are like 3 years. Yeah. You know how long it takes to get it here in America? I call up an office and I have it later that day.
Yeah.
It's.
Yeah. Is the AMA subject to congressional oversight, or is it?
No. They're entirely self-regulating.
Well, see, this is a problem. And now I understand why you're suggesting introducing another bureaucracy to compete with an existing bureaucracy. But the idea is that the other bureaucracy will have the same demand side within the government, which is to grow itself, sustain itself, keep itself there. And it's like, are you worried that you're introducing another parasite into the system?
I would set it up as something like Freddie Mae or Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, where it was a government-created independent company, okay, with government powers.
The modern day Freddie Mac, or the 2000 version, the 2000 and the Bush New Home Start
The
version.
one that was started in the 1960s and 70s, which was prior to the 2008 crisis, where they had to federalize it all because they were going broke because of social justice.
Right. So you're going back. You're going back to the start. You're going back to almost a new corporation type entity.
Yeah, yeah. As a voluntarist, I am not going to want to create a new government body of any sort.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm all about privatization in every other facet. I want to privatize this too. If I could figure out a way of privatizing Medicare that wouldn't leave all those people who hadn't planned right hanging, I would do it. But I don't want to leave.
It's very
I
I
don't want to come off. I don't want to be evil. I don't want to be cruel, right? All of these people made their plans for retirement based upon faulty information and poor and very poor and being misled specifically by the government about what Social Security was.
Yeah.
Right? They were told Social Security was a retirement plan. Social Security is a tax and spend plan.
Yeah.
There's no Social Security trust fund. Oh, they say they have $2 trillion. $2 trillion lasts Social Security less than a year. But what they have is a promise from the most untrustworthy people in the world. Can you focus, you stupid camera? To provide for them, right?
Yeah.
And the promise is made by people who wanted their votes. So they made big promises, and then they introduced lies into other sectors of the government in order to cheat them. That's why the government has been underreporting inflation for so many years, is because that that messes with the
underreporting inflation for a few years. Yeah.
Oh, for since the 90s, the inflation reporting completely lost its actual
so
matching.
While you fix your camera, while you're fixing your camera there, I'll filibuster for a second. So so basically you're arguing that, like, this is a very Lou Rockwellian type concept where you want to improve outcomes for consumers because you want to get the efficient and correct market signals, right? So the quickest way to do that is through privatization. Privatization is a mechanism that allows the market to find an equilibrium status. So basically, that's what you're searching for. You're searching for a way to allow an equilibrium on the demand and supply side. That's what a lot of graphs show. Austrian economists don't focus so much on supply and demand graphs and do some Keynesian graphs because they worry more about
Should be
what's
focused.
what's seen. Yep, you're fine. What's seen and between what's seen and what's not seen. And what you're saying is that the AMA and some of these other bureaucracies, the VA and stuff, have got in the way of the unseen potential of the market forces, which is why there are inefficiencies in the system. And you're saying that you can,
Oh yeah.
you can find the place and the mechanisms to fix that without
Right.
going.
For instance, Medicare, depending on the procedure, marks things down or pays out automatically just 50% to 85% to 15% of the billed amount, right? I've got reports upstairs from my insurance company about how much Medicare paid out on each procedure. And some of them it is 15%, and that is what the provider had to take. So if you're paying out 15%, that means that the provider has to bill 6 times what it really costs, because they have to make what it really costs, or they can't provide the service, right? When they talk about $40,000 hospital bills, that's why. Is because the hospital visit actually required maybe $10,000 worth of actual goods and services and capital and time, but the markdowns made them bill $40,000 in order to get the $10,000 that they need to stay in business. And the healthcare industry is doing all right. I mean, the last time I checked, they were getting like a 10% yearly return on to capital, which is pretty decent. But 10% profit on capital is a payback time of 10 years. Even that, if I was doing a business, I'd need to get from a new piece of equipment much more than 10%, right?
And that's within the cost. That's within the context of the capital equipment. On one hand, getting smaller, faster, and cheaper the whole time, along with Moore's law, But I mean, on the other side, I mean, they have a lot more expensive machines. I mean, the MRI machines have not, but they're all getting cheaper. It's all getting cheaper and more efficient. I mean, on the whole,
that's how capitalism works. When you're providing a good or a service, and there's more than one person providing that, you have the opportunity to push down your costs in order to produce that thing to serve your customers better and get more customers, right?
Yeah, and the whole economy in general has been running off like these productivity returns. Like, it hasn't been because the American economy is so wonderful, and that the interest rate policy has been such a great job, and that the government has been doing such a fantastic job at managing the economy. It's because everything's getting cheaper, quicker, faster, and it's keeping everything afloat in terms of running a GDP along. And the medical industry is and this healthcare industry stuff is not immune to that.
Yeah, well, and then the UBI is so.
Do you have a UBI plan?
I would prefer to make a network of hostels. There are youth hostels throughout Europe where a young single person can go and spend the night and get a meal in the morning and go on their way. And so I would want to implement a network of hostels on a voluntary basis, provided by voluntary community organizations, and maybe one-time grants for building from the federal government to help that along. And then anybody who needed a place to sleep or a meal to eat could go to one of these hostels and say, I need a place to sleep. And I could bed down for the night, and in the morning make their, help clean up and make the beds and, wash the linens, and with that, that, because that's what everybody would want.
Doesn't this also? I can think of a lot of ways people would abuse the system. I mean, I can see homeless people taking over these and turning into sort of shanty towns in a way. Is that not?
Well, what you do is you don't make it a place to flop forever. You get to sleep there. In the morning, you get up. You have to shower. You have to, this is part of the deal to stay here. You've got to shower in the morning, and you've got to, be up out of bed at 7 a.m. And because that's what, because we are going to spend the next hour cleaning the place up. We're going to take all the linens and go and wash them, and then we're going to remake all these beds. Everybody's already showered. We're going to make all these beds. And then everybody's going to go, because this is only for the night. You want to come back tomorrow, this evening? Have fun. Have fun with your day. Bye. This is what we do. And, and after that hostel part is done, then there's the meal. And that's and that, you line up, you get a bowl of oatmeal in the morning, you get a peanut butter sandwich at lunch, you get a bologna sandwich for dinner. It's gonna keep you alive. It ain't great, but it's cheap. Another possibility is a rice and beans meal, maybe if you're lucky with spices. But rice and beans is a complete protein, and for $1 you feed somebody. Oatmeal is a good, healthy breakfast, and it may not be flashy, but it'll stick to your ribs and give you enough energy to make it through the morning without a problem. And it's not a place for people to, shoot up drugs. There'd be a security guard there, both to make sure that nobody does anything violent, and to make sure that nobody does anything otherwise criminal, like mugging the other people there or things like that. And so there would be some expense that the endowment that these community organizations would have to arrange for before the government would say, okay, now we'll build the place for you. But it would be built, cinder block and concrete construction, no more comfortable than a jail cell, and more comfortable than a jail cell, actually, because you have actual bed, mattresses, unless the place is really, really cheap. So that's how I would care for people who can't, manage their own finances to the point where
Okay,
they.
all right, we get it. So you want to put people in a hostel, but that's fine. But what about people who are just going to lose their jobs, who were perfectly happy before? They were a truck driver, they were a retail clerk at some job where their job got, automatically like automated away. What about if they were a McDonald's person and they were happy in their job and now they've lost their job to automation? And it's not their fault so much. It's they're new to life, or they whatever's going on. I mean, it sounds like a bit of like a
Well,
punishment, doesn't it? Or are you trying to incentivize them to find new skill set to get back into the economy?
yeah, I believe in the Christian value of caring for your fellow man. Actually, that's a Jewish value too. But in the Torah, in the original books of the Bible, the rule was you don't glean the edges of your field.
Mm.
You don't harvest all the way to the edge of the field. You leave the corners, and you don't go back and pick up anything you dropped in the field. And the poor people who didn't have land would go and do that little bit of work and get something to eat to store up, and then they'd be able to survive a little bit, and then they'd have to, and if somebody comes to your door, it says don't turn them away, but remember you were poor in Egypt, and love your neighbor as yourself.
Mm.
And so that's where this idea is coming from, is caring for the poor in a way where you've cared for them, but you have not given them the dignity which comes from things you have earned yourself in order to make your life better, right? And the thing is, there's a lot of barriers to housing in America now, right? We have 98% of the households have indoor plumbing now. Well, yeah, that's great. Well, part of the reason for that is that in the 50s, most municipalities and counties banned the construction of a place without indoor plumbing. So yeah, when you stop building places with no indoor plumbing, and all the grandfathered in ones have to, if they ever get turned over, have to have indoor plumbing before somebody licenses, gives them the ability to anybody the ability to live there.
Mm.
Well, yeah, then everybody has indoor plumbing. But I'm actually surprised we have 1% of the country that doesn't have indoor plumbing. So what can you do? Well, you have to break that monopoly, right? You have to say that if somebody has their own land and the waste control that they do is not going to impact the environment off of their land, well, then they can handle whichever way they want. And if that means a kaibo a little outhouse out back, well, if you're broke, a hut and an outhouse is a lot better than sleeping under a bridge,
Yeah,
and it's a permanent address,
I like
and
this.
it's, so you've
Yeah, keep going.
you change the EPA regulations that are locking in people and keeping them from setting up a new outhouse, and you change the requirement that a house has to have electricity and working plumbing in order to be considered, in order not to be condemned. And now people can start small. Halsoppel's talking about a 200 cubic foot thing, which is one room. And you can't build that in most places in America because they will not let you open that for dwelling. They won't let you open that for dwelling because it doesn't have running water,
sanitation,
sewage, heating. Well, it might have heating and air conditioning. That takes up just a couple cubic feet of a window air conditioner. But it doesn't have a minimum square footage requirement for a bedroom. I mean, I can't even set up a bedroom in my own house here that's less than 10 feet by 10 feet. That's 100 square feet, 8 feet high, 7 feet high. That's 700 cubic feet, 4 times what Halsoppel says that we should have for everybody. And I can't even, that's my minimum just to set up a bedroom in my house.
Yeah. Yeah, and you got to take into account that America's weather changes dramatically as well. So you mentioned heating and stuff. I mean, these are really important. I mean, these aren't there's snowstorms, and in the south of Florida there's there's tropical wetlands, and I mean America's is such a diverse country, and so this heating thing.
The natural state of humanity, is really bad. And I feel for these people who are homeless. I've fellowshipped with them and I've talked with them. I did some ministering with a homeless shelter. So
and a lot of homelessness itself is a very complicated issue, in the fact that you have to consider a lot of homelessness. Some of homelessness, a chunk of it, is mental disorders and things of that nature. It's education factors where they can't they can't read or write properly, and that's why they don't pay their rent on time and they don't do other things. There's homelessness is a complicated factor in itself. It's not a supply and demand issue. It's just on the fact because there's plenty of houses in some of these places, and there's still homeless people. So it's economic, it's mental health, it's access, it's education, it's a whole bunch. It's drug and alcohol abuse. It's religion. It's a whole wide factor of things. Homelessness is an incredibly complicated conversation.
Well, you talk about what do you do with people who have a loss of a job because of some technological disruption?
Yeah.
Well, what do we do with all the limners? The people who paint lines on carriages. Wait, you didn't know that was a job? Well, what do we do with all the stablemen?
Well, yeah, well, I know
the
that
guys
the horse
who carry horses when you're in the city.
I know all the horse and buggies, because sometimes whole industries are replaced. Yeah, obviously. Yeah. And the horse and buggy industry was replaced by the automobile. And the automobile industry introduced 1 billion times more jobs than the horse and buggy industry ever could have or did. And so, and if you're still in that industry, you're in Amish land. I mean, I hope you're doing well over there, but it's not exactly a booming industry anymore. So, if you're a Mises person like yourself, like a Lou Rockwellian type Mises person, you can never, because of scarcity. And I know transhumanists are trying to escape scarcity, but because of scarcity, because of the factor of scarcity, there won't ever be enough jobs. You can't ever fill. There's always going to be jobs. That's the Mises line.
Well, the thing is, a minimum wage puts a floor on what you can pay somebody. Okay? Legally. But what they don't say is that the real floor is zero, not hiring that person.
Yeah,
Okay?
yeah, I
Now
agree.
tell me, do you think somebody would be better off making $5 an hour and being able to afford a small hovel with an outhouse, or making $0 an hour, being homeless, and never learning anything about how to work on a job?
And I've been asked this question myself. People have asked me, and they've said, "Hey, would you rather, what do you think about minimum wage?" And I said, I'd rather be earning $9 an hour than none. Rather be earning $5 an hour than none. You see what I mean? And at a point when minimum wage is, let's say for hypothetical sake it's zero, then it's on the person who's the employee. They can actually almost choose their rate from then on, because there'll be so many options. Well, there are so many options around any price point, because there's so much competition within all of those competitive labor rates.
And do you know how many people in America actually earn a minimum wage?
Probably over half. I don't know. It's huge.
No, no, it's like 0.5%.
Oh, like,
And most of those are teens or very young people. Okay,
you mean the
it's
ones
it's.
that work at Amazon or Walmart or something?
Do you know how much a Walmart checker makes?
$7 something?
No, no, a Walmart checker makes $13 an hour, almost twice the minimum wage.
Why is that? Yeah, that's news to me. Sorry, I didn't know
Why
that.
is that? It's because it's a skill. Being a good cashier is a skill, and Walmart has found that that is the price that they have to pay, and a cashier, in order to keep that cashier working as a cashier and maintain that valuable skill in the company.
Hmm.
Okay, the people behind the meat counters, behind even the stock boys at a Walmart are not doing this at minimum wage. Walmart pays hardly anyone minimum wage. And the people who are saying, well, we got to raise these minimum wages, they don't even know who's making the minimum wage. They're not paying attention. And you look at the places that have done these $15 minimum wages, and what's happened? Well, the small restaurants close down,
Yeah.
because those are the places where the people are paying minimum wage.
This is the other.
The
This is the
small
other.
companies are shutting down because
Yeah.
those are the startup businesses that haven't made a solid customer base yet. They haven't been built their reputation to the point where they can start charging more. They have to have low wages in
That's
order to cover those wages on what they can earn based upon what that business can make in the market. And so
their competitive
they
edge is
really
that
are
great.
seeing, flight of these little taqueritas and things like that out of the $15 an hour areas, and the people just move into the suburbs where they don't have $15 an hour minimum wage, and set up with higher expenses for rent, and charge a little higher out there, and you know, what does it do? It hurts the people in the city who can't make it out to the suburbs to eat at a taquerita, and so they just can't have a nice cheap taco because somebody put in a $15 minimum wage rule in the city.
Yeah, this is a good point, because like I hear this sometimes with people who are saying Bernie Sanders is just a big corporate shill in this way, because by knocking up the minimum wage to an unattainable height, you eliminate all the competition, because as you were just explaining, their competitive edge is the fact that they have those cheap labor rates, and now they can't compete on that fact. So if you raise minimum wage, and if you increase administration costs, the big boys can absorb those costs, and actually end up knocking out their competition, the mom and pop shops, as you call it over there.
Yeah,
So
that's why a lot of big businesses are perfectly happy to unionize
yeah,
and to agitate for a union labor law, a law which
oligopolist, oligopoly. It's classic.
yeah. So the UBI, I would prefer to do it in a way that doesn't that's voluntary, to provide for these people in a way that's voluntary, and let's say I give a quarter acre and a little house to everybody who's on Social Security. You start collecting Social Security. If you want to collect it, you have to move out to this little community out here in the West that's on that we're going to subdivide off of federal land. And the house is your first year's Social Security payment. It's not a great house. It's a 1-bedroom, 1-bath, studio type house. It's a little tiny 400 square foot house, but it's yours. While you're on Social Security, you can live there. And now you're out of the city. Your prices are really low. We have a canteen down the street. And we've got a hospital in town so that if you get sick, we got a clinic and a hospital just down the road, ready to take care for you. But there ain't much to do. But that's not our problem.
What about like when the Hoover Dam was under construction? They built Boulder City, right? And Boulder City was a temporary city that they built up, as a labor camp, as somewhere where the laborers who were building the Hoover Dam could rest and enjoy. Why not just take your plan of giving everyone land or whatever and expand that out to a construction project, for example? And I know you're not in favor of construction projects, but you pick some.
It would be a construction project because, but what we want to do is twofold. First, we want to reduce the demand for housing in the big cities where the demand is too high already and the prices for real estate are very high.
Yeah.
Okay. And these people, if they're going to collect Social Security, we say this is the deal. You move out to this community, you can have Social Security there, and your first year's Social Security is getting this house. And for that, and then after that, then you can start collecting your normal numbers. But until then, you're going to be on a stipend just for of food stamps and this house. You'll have a place to live. You'll have food to eat. We're going to cover the utilities while you're there. But this is your house now that you're on Social Security. This is the deal. You don't get to live in the house you used to have and collect Social Security. If you want to keep your other house, then you don't get Social Security until you decide that you want to do this instead. Because this way, we have to stop the rich people taking money out of Social Security. Okay? What's happening now is we're taxing the very poorest. Okay? Because Social Security payments are maximized on a yearly basis, right?
Yeah.
You only get taxed on the first 52,000 or something, right? But everybody who makes up to 52,000 pays that 15% tax. It's not 7.25% that you see taken out of your paycheck, because the employer also has to kick in 7.25%. So it's 15% that you're getting not paid,
Yeah.
that the employer, right, could pay you that 15%, and you'd have that as take-home pay if the Social Security tax wasn't there. But that's taxing the very poorest. The guy who makes minimum wage gets taxed 15% for Social Security, even out of the minimum wage.
Yeah.
And he doesn't get to deduct that off of his income tax, and he doesn't get to do anything else. That's just off the top. You never get it back. And then we're taking these people who were making the maximum when they retired, which is, the upper middle class people, and they get the most payments because it's based on the 2 best quarters of your last 5, right?
Yeah.
And so the people who were making the over 50,000, their 2 best quarters cap them out, and they get $1,600 a month, whereas the person who was scraping by on minimum wage gets $500 a month. So we're taxing our poorest to give the maximum benefits to our richest. And those benefits aren't income tested in any way. So you can have $1 million in the bank and have $50,000 a year off of that $1 million in annuity payments, and Social Security still gives you another $1,600 a month. So now you're living on $100,000 a year, living high off the hog, flying down to the Caribbean anytime you want, going off and having 2 houses, and it's nothing, because Social Security is giving you an extra $30,000 a year between you and your wife. It's nuts. It's just nuts.
It's a good job if you can get it.
It's a great deal for the AARP people. That's why it's a third rail of American politics to say anything bad about Social Security. So we take all those people who are rich and have a nice house and that's all paid for, and we say, okay, you want Social Security, you have to live here. And and then we'll pay you your Social Security, and you have to also show that you're destitute and that you need the Social Security. And we don't mind taking care of people who need taking care of, but if you're if you've got $1 million retirement fund because you've been putting in your maximum to your 401k for your entire working life, well, you don't need Social Security on top of that.
Tell me.
And it'll make a lot of people angry, but it would provide the funding in order to do these things for the people who really need it, and that's the problem. Is that we've got a government which has been which has been taking care of people who don't need it, and not taking care of people who do need it.
With the 401k, is that tied to stocks, bonds, or how is that? How is that distributed? So, because I know, I've watched Dave Ramsey a lot. If you've heard that.
Okay, a 401k is a tax-deferred retirement account.
Tax-free.
And what you put it into is entirely up to you.
Okay.
You can go to Shift Gold, and you can and you can tell them, I want to buy 1,000. I want to set up a 401k account, and here's my $100,000 I'm transferring over, and you transfer over $100,000 to them from Merrill Lynch or something, and out of that, and it's all inside the 401k, and that all the paperwork gets done, and then you can put your 401k in gold if you want. You could
Right.
have $100,000 in gold in your 401k, and there's no reason not to.
All right, so yeah, because I was always confused as to where, because in Australia we have superannuation, and I'm pretty sure, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that it gets decided where the company decides. I'm not
Oh, no,
100%
no.
sure about that in
In
Australia.
America, you control your IRA or your 401k.
Yeah, your Roth IRA, yeah.
The the there are retirement plans that aren't controlled by that, and those are usually the union plans or the company retirement plans for federal railway employee companies that have to do, or other big businesses have provided their long-term employees. Like I've got a friend who was a county clerk for 25 years or 30 years or something, and he's got a retirement fund from the county government now that's paying, and he's moved out of Cook County, and now he's in the lower peninsula of Michigan, in his hometown again, living near his brother and having a nice, enjoying life, which he deserves to do. He's in his 60s, he's retired, and he deserves to do that. But he's got the retirement fund, and he's got Social Security.
Mm.
And he's double dipping off of the government. The retirement fund was supposed to be contributed to by the county all along, but they jiggered the numbers and didn't do the full thing, and so really he's funded by tax dollars for the retirement to about 2/3 of it at this point. The retirement funds are really badly underfunded in Illinois, especially.
Understood. All right, so
And
so your UBI policy, you're rethinking UBI. That's your policy, because the Transhumanist Party, yeah, they have
well,
stipulations
I'm
and planks.
looking I'm looking at 2020 and what we can do in 2020, right?
Yeah.
It may turn out down the road that there's a time when there is real displacement of the workforce. Right now we have 3.8% unemployment, which is pretty close to full employment, right? We're back up to 64 million people working in America, and things are really humming along for American business. They say, Trump didn't do anything. You can't bring those jobs back. Well, he must have waved some sort of magic wand somewhere, because we've got record low unemployment, and that's common for the end of a boom cycle.
Mm.
And if you look at Austrian business cycle theory, there's a lot of signals that we're really at the end of a boom cycle, and that we're going to see a recession.
Correction.
Well, the problem is, if you go back and calculate actual inflation based upon actual prices of things, and not government jiggered stuff.
Yeah.
And then you adjust GDP growth for that inflation. We have been in a depression since 2001.
Yeah.
Since 2001. And it's been one of these double dip depressions, just like in the 1930s. And for the same reason, government policy exacerbated the problem.
Yeah. Sorry, you go on.
And government policy has caused the inability of the businesses to adjust to the actual markets in the way that they need to.
Yeah, I agree with this idea. This comes from probably James Rickards, if you know that guy. And I'm a big supporter of James Rickards' $10,000 gold, and the fact that real adjusted GDP because you're not growing at the rate that you could have been growing. There's opportunity cost there, and that adds to the depression figures. So you should have been growing at 5%. You're only growing at 2%. That's 3% loss of GDP. That's a depression. So,
well, in 1998, I bought a Hyundai Elantra station wagon, and that was $13,000. A Hyundai Elantra today is 25. That's 100% inflation since 1998. In 20 years, we've doubled our prices. Now, the 20th root of 2 that's the y root 20 is a 3.5% inflation rate.
Yeah.
Average a year, and none of those years have they reported a 3.5% inflation rate. None. So we've been lied to, and the reason is they do that lie. They do the lie in order to cheat the retirees.
Yeah, and candidate Trump even talked about this, and then President Trump has changed his mind on this. But no, candidate Trump agrees with us.
Yeah, right. And well, because when he was candidate Trump, he wasn't the one
It wasn't his name on the
facing the budget shortfall that would come if he said, you're going to go back to calculating this inflation rate correctly.
Yeah.
You're going to stop cheating these people.
Yeah.
If he said that now, right? If he said you're going to stop cheating these people, and suddenly Social Security expenditures of $982 billion this year go up by 3% instead of 1%. That's a little bit different because now he's got $1 trillion. That's 3% of that is 30 billion instead of he's they're cheating out people of 20 billion a year in and it may not seem like a lot, but if you're on that $1,200 a year and it goes from paying for all of your expenses to wait, now I've got to decide whether I want to eat even hamburger, or whether I'm buying peanut butter in order to pay the electric bill.
Yeah.
And then all the stupid electrical policies like wind power and stuff, which you look at where they've put that in great numbers, and oh God, right, even with massive hydropower coming out of Hoover Dam, with closing down San Onofre, Pacific Gas and Electric Gas is charging 20 cents a kilowatt hour, which is twice what I pay here in Missouri, where we have coal power for 80% of our electricity. But even we've got these renewable mandates that are messing up the grid here, But anyway, that's another topic entirely.
Yeah. All right.
We've covered the the Medicare for all,
Yeah.
and what I think we can do to help that situation.
Yeah.
We've covered a universal basic income, and what I think we can do realistically today in America to solve the problem of people who need and sleep.
Would you like to come on a show with Mr. Holsopple and work through these two ideas together? Because I mean, you're talking about physical infrastructure, he's talking about 2x2. They kind of correlate in the very short term. Mr. Holsopple is a very short term thinker. Not saying he doesn't think for long term, but he places emphasis on the things that you can do next year and the coming 30 years. He thinks that's more important for science and technological progress. Would you like to come on the show with him and have a talk with him about this?
Well, sure. I'd be happy to talk with him. He's Charles. I don't think Charles is stupid. I think he just hasn't run through the numbers and figured out and run up against the problems that are causing the housing shortage in the first place. So I've actually designed small houses. I mean, not just sketched them out, but this is how much wood we need. This is how much plywood. This is how many 2x4s. This is how much concrete. This is how much it would cost to build this small house. In materials, and this is how much labor is, and this is how long it takes to put it up. I know this stuff from an engineering standpoint, from having done.
Mr. Holsopple, he I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, he's invented some sort of small housing thing as well. I mean, it's not.
Well, so have I. I mean, I've got a CAD drawing of something I call the Hexa house. You build in a factory little wedge-shaped floor panels, floor sections, and wall panels that would fit on the wedge, and then roof panels that are a bigger wedge shape so that they form a peak. And then you just assemble it on site with, lag bolts through to hold the two pieces together, and then close up the little access hatches for those lag bolts, and then you're done. And even the toilet and water closet facilities and kitchen are on one of these little wedges built in the factory. And so you just ship that wedge out, and now they have the wedge with the shower and a toilet. Here's the wedge with the shower, here's the wedge with the toilet, and all you have to do is put in the plumbing to this one connection that's here on the side.
Yeah, I think Mr. Holsopple's project was submitted to a university which they liked, and then he couldn't get funding, or he didn't know how to do the funding structure or whatever. This is kind of an interesting thing, but his was born out of the activism scene where he was doing the Occupy Wall Street stuff, and he realized from that experience of how little you can survive on. You can survive on the 2,000 nutritional calories.
Well, part of it is people are picky. I can go to the MLS right now and find a dozen houses at $20,000. Unless I've got really crappy credit, $20,000. That's a house that's intact on a lot and could be lived in for $20,000. And the mortgage payment on a mortgage that small It's like 150 a month.
That's nothing.
Yeah, that's less than my condo fee.
Yeah.
That's less than my condo fee.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a great house. It's a small ranch little thing, probably, or it's a really old house with some problems. But it's a house that's livable,
Yeah.
and you know, it's yours.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, this is also a good point because there is a surplus of houses. Maybe not so much now. Maybe this is I am talking a little bit in the past, but especially straight after the foreclosure crisis, there was an absolute surplus of houses because everyone's getting kicked out of the houses. I mean, it's not about there is sort of enough houses, I guess.
yeah, well, it's supply and demand. And why is that house selling for 20,000? Well, because it's in a dying little community, and it's not a really great house in that community. And you know, there's not a whole lot of work nearby, right nearby that house, and it's not big enough to raise a family in. You know, the way people want to be today. My 3-bedroom condo here is 1,600 square feet. And that's, you know, probably has plenty of extra room. I've got an extra bedroom, and you know, I use for an office, and I've got, you know, a dining room and a kitchen, dining area, and you know, it's a really nice little you know, condo. But even this is small for today's Americans. I mean, the average house size is now 2,400 square feet, 50% larger than this. And I can't, you know, that's a 4 or 5 bedroom house size, with, you know, really spacious communal rooms, and you know, a really spacious living room. You know, and most people would, you know, I grew up in a house which was 3,000 square feet after we finished out the basement, so with bedrooms for all of us. You know, 7-bedroom house. And that's you know, easily doable in America. American housing is just huge compared to Europe.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the situation is in Australia there.
Big.
But
big.
Yeah.
Big. Yeah, we have overly large houses. Built on cheap credit.
So what's a square meter size?
Oh, I don't know. I could check it. Australian housing, square feet, average. The average 2017 2018, the average size of a new house built in Australia was 230.8 square feet. Oh, it's square meters.
Okay, so that's 9 times 9 is times 10. So 2,300, a little smaller than an average American.
757.2 square feet.
Yeah.
So yeah, big.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a nice, comfortable house. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But you know, you look at the low end of these people of need in America, right? And you can live in America. You can eat on $1 a day. I worked that out on the price of rice and beans that I could go out to the store today and buy in bulk. Okay. It's not nice to have to live on rice and beans and $1 a day, but you can do it. So if we're talking about just maintenance of a person, UBI, maybe that's not $1,000 a month. Maybe that's maybe that is really the 150 for that minimal house and mortgage, and $30 for minimal food, and maybe another $50 for electricity, so you don't go stir crazy. And that another $20 for water. Water is cheap. It's crazy cheap, or should be, because America, in most places, there's lots of water. Places where there isn't a lot of water, it shouldn't be crazy cheap. Phoenix should not have crazy cheap water, but they subsidize it, and so they do.
Yeah, absolutely. So like your message to the USCP in this UBI debate, because you're changing the nature of the debate, which is actually, I appreciate this, because I've had the candidate, I've seen them all, I know them all, and they all go down this road. But you're the first one to actually say, hang on, let's rethink the whole concept. So what's your message to the USCP on this UBI issue? Because I really like what you're doing.
Well,
what are you going to tell Gennady? Gennady, you're listening. I know you're listening. Listen.
Well, if we take the current outlays by Social Security of $982 billion, okay, and what that works out to is about $600 a month for each household. Okay? So that actually is livable, but not in a big city, and not in a very nice place, right? And maybe it's enough. It's enough to keep a roof over your head and enough to keep food in your belly. But then we'd have to convince all the people on Social Security that they should give up their $1,600 a month in order to get $600. And politically, I don't think that's going to work.
Yeah, nah.
So, do we add an additional $1 trillion to the federal budget and still give the Social Security payments to all these Social Security people, or don't give UBI to Social Security recipients? If you're on Social Security, you keep with that, and if you're not, well, then you get this UBI thing instead. And that starts today. If you retire today, you get UBI. If everybody gets the UBI starting today, and people who are on Social Security keep getting their Social Security minus the UBI number. So, would that work? Maybe. How are we going to come up with $1 trillion?
Defense.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. If we go down to 2 aircraft carriers, one for the East Coast and one for the West Coast, and we go down to no foreign bases, and an army of 50,000 men instead of 2 million.
Go back to Minutemen.
Well, yeah, we go to basically the 50,000 would be our training cadres, and we'd increase the National Guard, but it would not be a National Guard where you get paid for your weekend time learning how to be a soldier. No, you are an adult male. Why haven't you done this? If you haven't done it by the age of 24, then we use the draft and we pull you in for 3 months when you're 24 to go through basic training. And if you haven't already done it, you can spend your time. You can spend your month, your 3 months. You've got to go through 3 months of basic training to be an adult male in America, because you're part of the militia.
What happened to voluntarist John Schattke? He's gone somewhere. The voluntarist version of you disappeared over the course of this century.
A well-regulated militia. This is the Second Amendment. They say a well-regulated militia should be necessary to the defense of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So in order to be a well-regulated militia, you need to be able to participate in modern warfare the way that the modern warfare is fought, as best as we know how.
Yeah.
And I assure you, the people in West Point do know how to fight wars.
Yeah. And I have to
And
be
there
very
is
clear.
and if we just had a cadre of people, it'd only be about 50,000, and you get to volunteer to take that training whenever, or to opt out, but you have to let us know that you're opting out as a pacifist or a religious, person who doesn't believe
Conscientious objector, yeah.
A conscientious objector, and all you have to do is go in and fill out the form to do that. But otherwise, you come in for a camp 3 times over. Any time while you're, before you're 24, and we had no problem with you. But if you get to 24 and you haven't done it, we got to track you down and we got to pull you in and get you to do this, because you're part of the militia. And it's your responsibility as part of the society to be ready to defend that society if we happen to need defense.
And
that's how as president, I have to reconcile my anarchy mind with the requirements of the Constitution. And the Constitution requires a well-regulated militia. And I think that way we could say we don't need a $2 million man army. We just need to have a 120 million man army that's ready to go anytime we say there's a problem and we declare war. And because we don't have a declared war, as president, I would immediately have to say to Congress, I'm sorry, thank you very much. We no longer need this military expenditure. I will have a budget for the maintenance of West Point and a cadre presented to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have not had a declared war since World War II. Yeah. As president, it would be my responsibility to notify Congress that I no longer need the defense expenditures. It would piss off a lot of people who are making money off of defense expenditures. But you know what?
Yeah.
It would free up all those people.
Yeah.
And they can keep designing and building their gadgets, and people might buy them. The National Guards might buy them, but we would no longer need, be giving federal funds to the National Guards. I mothball most of the fleets that we have, and it would be 2 defensive fleets just to maintain readiness, and those people would be 2-year termers, because we want to have a cadre of people who had been trained to run those ships and their sister ships that are in mothballs and be ready to go on a moment's notice when we call them up. And that's the minimalist military that I believe that America should have. And that would stop our foreign adventures, and it would stop us, let's just bomb Libya.
Yeah, that was a bad idea.
Let's just bomb Iran. What?
That would also be a bad idea.
So, yeah, would that free up a lot of taxes money? Oh yeah, that would free up a hell of a lot of tax money.
That's your $1 trillion.
You say to Lockheed Martin and Grumman and such, you're welcome to make all these arms that you want, and you're welcome to try and sell them to the different National Guards. But we don't have a war, and it is irresponsible for me to be funding any R&D for military things when we don't have a war. Sorry. And just end it like that, because any other way you're going to get suckered in, and the military-industrial complex is going to talk to you about all the theater operations that we need to maintain and the superiority we have to keep, and I'm going to say, that's nice. We're at peace. There is no theater operations at peace. The war on drugs isn't a war. We haven't declared war on terrorism. You can't have war on a concept. I'm going to war against Confucianism. What? I'm going to war against pacifism.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a
what?
concept.
I'm going to war against neighborliness. You say that about anything else, and they look at you like you're crazy. I'm going to war on terrorism. I'm going to war on drugs. All right then. There's the aspirin. You're welcome to hit it with a hammer. Does that make you happy? There you go. You fought your war on drugs. You won. But, what is it? I'd push for abolishing all of the illegal drug laws. No more. And then and even if they didn't abolish them, I would instantly pardon everybody on a drug charge in any prison anywhere. I'd just go to I'd send people out to I'd send out my operatives and I'd say, go to every prison, get me a list of everybody who's in there for a drug charge of any sort. If it's a nonviolent crime, I don't want them in prison. And so I'm going to go and I'm going to pardon them all. And I'm going to commute their sentences, and I'm going to pardon everybody and I'm going to retroactively clear out the record of everybody who ever was convicted of one. I don't care. And anytime anybody comes in to the court system on a drug charge, just forward that to my office and we'll write up the pardon. I don't care if Congress is going to keep the law on the books. I'm pardoning everybody on drug charges instantly before they even go to trial. As soon as I learn that they've been charged, I'm pardoning them. As president, that is my prerogative. And yes, I wouldn't mind pardoning 1 million people a year.
Yeah,
And I
well,
just have somebody on staff who would type up these pardons, and I would check it over and do a quick glance to make sure that the charge I was pardoning them for was a drug charge, and then I'd write it up, I'd sign my name, and off it would go. And everybody would be free.
yeah,
And
well,
it would, and you know what? Congress would drop the drug, enforcement of drug laws would stop overnight because there's no money in it.
yeah. So you'd be yeah. So Corrections Corps of America is not backing your campaign. I can attest to that. But you're right. There is a serious problem there because America is has the largest prison population on the planet, followed by I think China or something. And
Well, we are the fourth largest population country on the planet, I think. And so, and we've got this crazy drug law issue, which is just insane. And we have the technology and the money to catch these people and put them into jail. And then we've got the money to keep them in jail for nonsense.
Yeah.
And so, it may only save 50 billion, but hey, if Congress doesn't come along, I will do what I can as president, which is pardon everybody. And, if Congress doesn't come along, I will do what I can as president, which is not ask for a military budget and bring everybody home because that's my prerogative as president.
What about Haywire and Ben Zion are both? They also go a little bit further and they say sex crimes. So they mean like prostitutes who have gone to jail. And would you fall in line with that policy as well? Do you see prostitution as a crime, moral and or other, punishable by jail?
Personally, what somebody does with their own body is their own business. And so, but the federal government doesn't have a law about sex crimes. Okay, that's why prostitution is 100% legal in Nevada, is because it's a state issue, and I have to allow the states to have their issues. If they want to have their issues, then, well,
that's federalism.
They're stupid in my opinion, but it's not my place to make that judgment for them. And there's a lot of places in the country that have de facto made it not an issue and don't really enforce. But I personally think that your body, your choice. Even if you want to spread your legs for some stranger for cash, whatever. If it makes you, if it covers what you need, and you can deal with that sort of degrading situation, that's your choice. Or if you happen to be an nymphomaniac, and that's how you make your money, is having your dollies. There's probably a certain percentage of nymphomaniacs out there who would be happy to have strange guys actually pay them to do what they want to do anyway.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a market out. I'm sure there's a bunch of people out there for that. Oh, that's very interesting. Anything else you want to talk to us about your campaign apart from healthcare and UBI?
Well, I think those are the big things that are on the party platform, and I wanted an opportunity to actually talk about as
I
as
think.
an and get the discussion into the realm of reality instead of out in cloud cuckoo land
Yeah,
where you're promising stuff that nobody can ever fulfill.
I want to thank you for that because there's two debates I want to have you on. I want to have you on with Mr. Holstopple on the 222 issue and your UBI, which is the hostel thing, versus his sort of UBI, which is the 222, which is kind of a similar overlap. And also, I want you to have you on with Ben Zion, who thinks he can pay for a UBI of $52,000 a year somehow through federal land leases to carbon neutral companies.
It ain't going to happen. There's already 34 million acres under BLM land leased out to companies for mineral extraction, and only 12 million acres of that is being used. So the demand for that land is not there. It simply is not there. So you can't sell something nobody wants. Yeah, if I want to buy a lot in my neighborhood here, I have to pay $50,000 for an empty lot.
Yeah.
And that's a quarter of an acre. But that's because this is a good place to have land. And there's no place around here that's owned by the federal government unless I go down to the Mark Twain National Forest. And I'll tell you, that's not what he's thinking is going to get leased out. Nobody's going to lease out the Mark Twain National Forest for forestry or for making houses in. Even though, as an anarchist, my idea would be just, open up all federal lands for homesteading, and if you want to use it, use it, because and if you want to buy it outright at $10,000 an acre, great. Buy it for whatever use you want at $10,000 an acre. Sight unseen or sight seen, we don't care. If it's on our lists, we need to sell it. The government should never have kept any of that. It should have all been sold off ages ago. And these national forests and national parks, privatize them. There's no reason that should be a federal level thing. So there should, Yosemite would no longer be a national park. It would just be Yosemite Park. And they can charge whatever they want for it, and people can donate whatever they want for it. And I don't even know what the budget for Yosemite National Park is, but we can stop taxing people who are retirees in a nursing home in New Jersey who can never get to Yosemite ever again in their life for Yosemite National Park, which the people of California enjoy. So, and the people who enjoy it can pay what the market will bear for enjoyment of that. And, I would make those conservatory trusts where, they are tasked with conserving the park and making it useful for enjoyment of the public. That would be a little bit different than their current mandate, which puts an emphasis on conservation. For instance, Yellowstone used to have walkways in all the active areas that they would reconfigure so that you could walk fairly near the interesting ones very easily, right? And walk from the interesting one to the next interesting one easily. And instead, they switched to conservation and stopped moving those walkways. So a lot of the walkways that are in Yellowstone now are just in empty dead zones with nothing going on near them. and nobody goes on them because there's nothing to see. And then the nice things are way off, and you're not supposed to go off the walkways to get to them, and so you can't see them. So like Old Faithful, you're now 150 feet back from it. When it used to be, you could essentially walk up, right at it, and they'd warn you off if you got over the pool, and say that's going to blow and it's going to be hot. You're going to want to be away from there. But it was your own lookout if you got scalded. So, now it's 150 feet back, and kid gloves around everything, and it's like, no, these things are transient.
Yeah.
Stop it. Stop it. The whole thing is transient. It changes every 20 years.
Yeah. It makes sense. I was just trying to find for you the budget plan for Yosemite National Park. It looks like $33 million.
Yeah, and that doesn't seem like much. It's oh boy, 10 cents from everybody in the country.
I can't confirm that. That's just a quick going over this budgetary committee hearing. But yeah, it's $33 million. Yeah, but would you be worried if someone put a giant slide on there or a roller coaster around there or something? Did that faze you?
If the people who are enjoying the park enjoyed the park that way,
yeah,
then who am I to tell them that that's stupid?
Yeah.
If I go there, I probably won't go on a water slide in Yosemite. I wouldn't want to see Angel Falls turned into a water slide, but it's not my call, and I don't think it would be conservation, and I don't think a conservation tasked a group tasked with conservation would let that happen to the Angel Falls.
Yeah.
But there's no reason that they couldn't set up a water slide, a water park at the base of that falls.
Yeah.
And so every time, you've got this natural cooling waterfall providing mist at the base, so it's nice and cool there, and you can run and play in the water and underneath the falls, and that might be fun, and that might be a good way to use that. But I don't know, and it wouldn't hurt the falls, which is mist by the time it drops 150 feet off the cliff. And it wouldn't hurt even the picturesqueness of it, because it's, the base of the falls, nobody sees that anyway.
Yeah.
Right now, it's blocked by trees from anywhere you can look at the falls reasonably to see the top.
And there's restaurants and things around the falls anyway that no one complains about. I haven't been there, but I know that for a fact. Maybe
it'd be cool if the Grand Canyon installed a big slide down to the bottom, and then an elevator back up to the top. That would, who knows? Maybe a mile-long slide would be fun.
Yeah, I'd do it.
A water slide down the Grand Canyon. That might be fun. The longest water slide in the world.
No, it's great. No, I endorse it. I think it would be fun. But yeah, there's always
there's plenty of places in the Grand Canyon you could do that, and it wouldn't spoil the view a bit. Because let's face it, the Grand Canyon is huge. You could literally have a water slide in one part of it that from the normal tourist areas to take a picture of this beautiful canyon, you would never see. Right? And great. Now you can have the longest water slide in the world, and down at the bottom, you can either choose to take the elevator back up, or you can get on a rapids ride, a float trip down the Grand Canyon. Maybe that's the way to use the Grand Canyon. Maybe that's a better way to use the Grand Canyon than having some bureaucrat in Washington make decisions about it.
Yeah, I'm totally on board with this. I'm totally on board with this. I like it. Jonathan
You
Schattke.
know, what do they do about Ayers Rock? People can climb that, right?
Well, they're shutting it down now. It was open for 50 years, 60, I don't know, however many years, and now it's shutting
If
it
Crocodile
down.
Dundee, they show him climbing all over Ayers Rock, right?
Yeah, now they're
So,
shutting it down.
yeah, misguided, misguided.
Yeah, I agree. Very disappointed about that because, you know, it's part of our heritage as citizens, you know, and they're going to take it away. But anyway,
So I will
Canberra.
bid you enjoy, and I think we're done with discussing
Yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah, yeah.
these topics at least. There's plenty more to discuss.
Yeah, more water
Uh,
slides coming your way all this week. Yeah, but no, thank you so much. You've brought some great points into the debate. You know, and you've changed it a little bit, and I like that. And you've enlightened us on a few different things. So that's really good. And we've got two great. We'll organise you and Mr. Holsopler and you and Ben Zion, and I think those will be, especially you and Ben Zion. That'll be a mammoth debate. That'll be really interesting. So I want to see. I'm ready for that. It's going to be great. So you have to do some prep for that one. But you and Mr. Holsopler as well, and you can fight about inventing and engineering stuff against each other. So that would be really cool. So really, thank you very much for coming on Detonation, and you know. We'll head up those two debates, and you know, again, welcome back to the platform anytime you want, and thank you so much for going over healthcare, which is a very serious issue, and VA care and UBI.
well, thank you for the opportunity to talk about it.
No problem, not a problem. Thank you very much, Jonathan Schattke, Detonation.